Greetings, travelers! Welcome once again to Eerie Travels. I am your humble host, Mark Muncy, author of Eerie, Florida, Freaky Florida, Creepy Florida, and the forthcoming Eerie Appalachia, and American Luchador. Don't look that one up. But anyway, we are here today to talk about some unusually dark subjects. Imagine that's what we do on this show. So again, I must ask for viewer discretion for you youngsters out there. You might want to turn this one off, or at least pretend and tell your parents that this is fine. But we are going to be talking some dark subjects tonight. I say that a lot, but tonight are some of the darkest we've talked. Now, we will be going to a couple fun places. We are going to be going to a wonderful location that was founded by a man known as the Bathtub Messiah and the cult that he followed and the cult he founded. And then we will later be talking about an infamous location known as the Devil's Tree. And there, a man supposedly with satanic influences committed some unspeakable crimes. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with a location you can visit in Florida that has ties to Jack the Ripper in England. Did you know that was in South Florida? Well, you will after this episode. So join us for these eerie travels. So our first location is kind of unusual. It is in the southwest Florida town of Estero, which is halfway between Fort Myers and Naples. It was kind of the middle of nowhere. And we begin this story with a man named Cyrus Teed. Now, Cyrus Teed lived up in Chicago, and he was an inventor and a man of science. And at one point, he was either A, struck by lightning, or B, nearly electrocuted. And either way, he saw God and decided that the world we lived in, the world we live on, is not on a world, but in a world. We are actually in a hollow earth, a Dyson sphere, as it were. And the sun and the stars are this big gas cloud in the middle of us. And he was told by God to build a new Jerusalem in this land of Florida. And he will bring his followers, and they will found the new center of the earth, and it will bring a golden age. So he gathered his followers, including several notable scientists, and they moved into the swamp, which is now Koreshan State Park. They were completely self-sustained. They were basically off-grid even back in the 30s. They built their own electric generator. They built their own theater there for performing stage plays. They built a store to sell stuff to the local populace. They built a big dining hall. They built several small homesteads. And all these things were done believing we're here in the hollow earth. He built a device that could measure the curvature of the earth to show that it was convex, not concave. He was very forward thinking, though. They were very holistic in their teachings. All the children there learned how to bake and cook and hunt and fish. He also, it didn't matter if you were a boy or a girl. They were very much open to women having the right to vote in their church and in all things. They became the de facto stopping spot between Estero, between Fort Myers and Naples. When the main road came through, that's when they built their big store, which was basically the 7-Eleven or Walmart of its day, selling their extra stuff and their clothing and all that. This cabin here was one of the early founders and who helped settle them here. He converted to their religion and helped stock the store and all that. He eventually moved away to Alaska after he became disenfranchised with them. Well, the reason people became disenfranchised was Cyrus, who founded them, sadly passed away in the 1960s. And the Koreshans were convinced he was going to come back. He was their Messiah, after all. He would be coming back. And so they left him in the bathtub he died in for days. And as the mold started growing on him, they were like, see, he's coming back to us in a new form. The state, of course, insisted, no, he's rotting, and for health reasons, we have to bury him. So the Koreshans buried Cyrus Teed in his bathtub in the nearby port city of Estero. And it wasn't until a few years later, when a hurricane came through and destroyed his mausoleum and washed the tub out to sea, they went, see, he's coming back to us after all. Now, the last Koreshan passed away in the 1980s. She famously said, yeah, I only stopped believing after we landed on the moon. They donated the land to the state, and it is now Koreshan State Park. And this is a beautiful place, tons of amazing locations. The buildings have all been carefully preserved. There are several sunken garden areas there, including a performance area that the orchestras used to play in. And this College of Life that they built, these standout training ways that they grew. They had a facility for doing laundry there that could launder all 80 members' clothing in a day. They had the generator. They had all these amazing structures that worked. So they were very scientific in their beliefs. People would come for miles to their theater to watch their performances because they had these incredible sets all made by everyone at the Koreshan compound. Now, they did allow all these forward-thinking things, but they also allowed the husbands to have as many wives as they wanted, but the wives could only have one husband. So, you know, some not so forward-thinking movements. But the fact that it drew scientists, that it drew thinkers like Edison and Tesla, both, and that it, you know, had some draws. Now, they believed in a diurnal God, which was that the God was both male and female. And they also believed in some other, you know, fun teachings that to this day, you know, are still studied by cult believers. Now, is this really, you know, the center of Hollow Earth? Well, we found that out when we finally got off this rock. But some people still say it's flat. So some people still may think we are inside Hollow Earth. But if you can go down to Estero and you can go to the Koreshan State Park, they do guided tours, but it is also an amazing place to get a lot of photos. When we were there were a lot of people taking prom photos and Easter photos because it's beautiful. Lots of fun animals there, lots of gopher tortoises, lots of snakes, and even some bunnies that we saw there on Easter Sunday. So definitely worth your trip when you're heading through Southwest Florida. Now, from that cult, we go to a very dark location. This is over in Port St. Lucie. And in Port St. Lucie, in Oak Hammock State Park, you will find an infamous location known as the Devil's Tree. You don't take the main path, you take this secondary path along the number 4 channel there, and you will walk through these wonderful scrublands, and right about here you'll get this weird just sensation as everything kind of gets quiet, everything gets a little darker, and it's just this unusual feeling as you come across this, the Devil's Tree. The Devil's Tree drips black sap, and if you collect that sap, it will make your satanic rituals more powerful, it is said. At one point, the city decided to chop down this tree. So they hired 2 men to chop it down. When their chainsaws struck it, their blades snapped. They went to go get a replacement chainsaw, and when they were on their way out of the area, they were in a head-on collision and killed. People said the tree was trying to stop them. So they decided to cement in where the sap was. That's what that rock was there. And sadly, that didn't kill the tree. It's grown up around the cement, so now it has an impenetrable base. But theories went that if you collected pieces of the tree and put them in a car of somebody you didn't like, then they would get in a car accident and die, and you would have the perfect crime. Well, that came from a woman who decided her husband was cheating on her and tried that theory, but she got in a car accident with bits of the tree in her car before she could put them in her husband's car. Now, behind the tree, you'll see this, which is the remains of a house. This is where the Devil's Tree gets its real name. This is where Gerard John Schaefer, a sheriff's deputy in Fort Lauderdale, he would capture women, usually 2 at a time. He liked to do what he called twofers. And they were usually hitchhikers, underage girls, and he would bring them back to this remote location, and he would hang them from this tree or tie them to this tree and do terrible things to them. Gerard was also a necrophiliac. So after he would kill them, he would continue to do terrible things to their body and make the other one watch. So a terrible, terrible man was only convicted of 2 murders, but they suspect that he killed as many as 30, possibly more. He was only found out because he tried to do it again in a new location after he had gotten a new job as another sheriff's deputy, but the victims escaped before he could kill them. When they realized it was similar to the crimes that were committed at that location of the Devil's Tree, that was when they pieced 2 and 2 together and were able to do a search warrant of Gerard's house, there where he was currently living with his mother. When they got into his room, they found his trophy shoebox with teeth and clothing and other trophies from various victims. Now, they were only able to convict him on the 2 where they actually found the remains at the Devil's Tree. Many of his other victims have still never been found. The story of the tree is almost, a causality of this. Some people say the reason he did all these things is because of the tree. Well, the other thing they found in his room, besides the trophies, was his notes. He had written all these elaborate stories of all the killings that he had done. Now, he claimed they were fictional, that this was fictionalized accounts, that none of this was real, that he was the next Stephen King in making, and that's why these seemed so real. This is why these despicable killings were so horrible. They did only convict him for the 2 murders. And even that, he claimed he was framed, that this was nothing, that these were all circumstantial evidence. But he was on death row for some time. He became pen pals with Ted Bundy. He became pen pals with several others. And he published his book, Serial Fiction. But we have a little something special for you. We're going to take a little trip in the Wayback Machine, and we've got a clip from a show from my time called A Current Affair, where they did some interviews with Gerard. So, enjoy.
But Deputy Sheriff Gerard Schaefer's games didn't end there.
She choked and collapsed to her knees, then flopped onto her back.
Gerard Schaefer is reading from his favorite book, a series of short stories he's written, a literal handbook on how to kill and how he killed.
I think his writing was instrumental in convicting him. I believe in the way he made the descriptions that Schaefer was intending to describe a crime that he had committed.
And a disgusting crime spree filled page after page, chronicling 36 murders. Martin County cops found in Schaefer's house the personal belongings of many missing young women whose bodies were never found.
In one of Schaefer's writings, he talks about keeping a souvenir from each of his crimes of the victims.
Schaefer's bloody trail ended with his superior officer, Sheriff Robert Crowder. He tracked down 2 young girls who endured a carbon copy attack, but miraculously escaped his clutches.
It resulted in charges being placed against Schaefer for having committed those 2 murders.
The 2 girls who escaped Schaefer's murder plot, Nancy Trotter and Paula Sue Wells, posed for these chilling reenactments for police, showing how they were gagged, hanged by a noose, handcuffed, and left out in the woods for his return.
And they probably would have been killed shortly after that. They were very, very fortunate. They were able to get themselves loose and get away.
And yet this diseased specimen vehemently proclaims his innocence.
Here you are accused of being one of the vilest serial killers in the country.
When I write something like this, some people say, well, you write that, you must be a homicidal maniac killer. And I say, no, I'm a writer. I'm an author. It's what I do. Hasn't got anything to do with me personally.
Now there are people saying that what you write about is that you've used your victims as material for your book.
Well, I've always been a creative writer. I have a very active imagination.
Sandra London of Atlanta, Georgia, was Schaefer's teenage sweetheart, and she would like to tell you a little bit about his imagination.
He was normal, except that he had a compulsion to kill. And when he told me about his urge to kill, his desires to kill that he was struggling with, I personally could not deal with that. I was 17 when I left him.
Miss London, who has visited Schaefer in prison, has a chilling theory of what might have happened to the missing women that Schaefer is believed to have murdered.
He had mentioned to me that if there was no body, there was no crime. And that he would take a body and take her out in the Everglades, and she'd be alligator meat by morning.
In my opinion, I think Gerald Schaefer is a greater, or maybe greater is not the term, but a worse serial killer than Ted Bundy. And I believe that probably Schaefer would have gotten the same attention as Bundy did had there been a death penalty.
Mention Ted Bundy's name and the monster's eyes sparkle.
Ted was obsessed with being the -- serial killer, and he liked his role as a celebrity killer. When he met me, he says, "Oh, I know you." He says, "Tell me, is it true that you got 34, or do you have private graveyards that they don't know about?" You know, because he had 36, and he thought that he was too ahead of me.
Here in Florida's Stark prison, Schaefer revels in the infamy of the accusations of mass murder, but claims his innocence and is actually appealing on the grounds that he was framed. The mind boggles.
I'm supposed to be accused of 34 murders all over the place, but nobody knows the names of the jurisdictions. But the reality of it is that I have never been even linked to a crime scene anywhere. She sat there very composed and ladylike while I adjusted the rope. She obviously had no inclination of what was about to happen.
Ted Bundy was dispatched to hell, and we can only pray that Gerard Schaefer finds his hell here on Earth.
Schaefer has been peddling.
So Gerard is a special kind of crazy. Sadly, when we look at this, you think about the Devil's Tree, you think about this, this crazed killer. He claimed to lead a satanic cult that would kill those, and the reason his former girlfriend there, who helped publish his book and helped get him that interview with Current Affair, she later dumped him for Danny Rawling, another serial killer. I think she just wanted to write books about serial killers. But he claimed the only reason she was still alive was because he allowed it. Otherwise, his satanic cult would have killed her. He later claimed to be the head of the KKK in secret. He claimed a lot of things. He also claimed to be innocent of all of this, as you saw, that this was all just his writing. he was just a creative writer who, if you look up some of my Google searches, you might think I'm a little crazy too. But, I've been acquitted too. So, but he was not. He was convicted. But what you must remember are the victims, and there are 2 that we are known. They did find trophies of possibly 18 other victims that he is a suspect in, and they're still researching these crimes, and they haven't found most of the bodies of these missing people. He has excuses for everything. Well, he had excuses. He was killed in prison by his roommate, apparently after a fight over some coffee. He was stabbed 49 times and had both his eyes removed, and couldn't have happened to a better guy. There was a bloody handprint on the wall that did not belong to his roommate, did not belong to anyone, and they thought it might have been Otis Toole, another serial killer who stayed in Stark with him, and who might have been worried because he was claiming that he knew where Adam Walsh's son was buried. And so we'll see. Anyway, that's part of that. So Gerard John Schaefer, the Devil's Tree, Oak Hammock State Park. Don't go taking pieces of the tree, and don't go lighting candles at the tree. It's a beautiful park, and we would like that tree to be there as long as it can. But definitely go there with solemn purpose. Our last location, as I mentioned at the beginning, has ties to Jack the Ripper. Not too far from Port St. Lucie, you go to Delray Beach, Florida, which is a beautiful beach town and has tons of great places to eat, tons of great places to visit. One place in particular stands out, and that is the Blue Anchor Pub. Now, the Blue Anchor Pub has this amazing storefront, because that storefront is from the 1800s in Whitechapel, London. They brought it here, brick by brick, board by board, stone by stone. All that original glass was brought over from London to the U.S. The Blue Anchor serves wonderful fish and chips, great food and drink, and historically, Winston Churchill ate here many times. Not here in Florida, but back when it was in London. And most infamously, though, 3 of Jack the Ripper's victims had their last meals going through those doors and eating at that bar. Now, here in Florida, the owners are proud to say that it is super haunted, that there are several ghosts. One in particular, there's a fan in the back of the bar that they cannot turn off. They don't know how it's wired in. It's supposedly not wired in, but it keeps going. And then there's a ghost there named Bertha that whenever someone turns off the fan, she gets very annoyed. But it is an amazing place to visit, wonderful fish and chips. So how, again, Jack the Ripper? Well, his victims ate there. So is it possible Jack ate there? Well, that's the theory, is if the victims had their last meals there, which they did, Jack was probably amongst the bar's patrons. So when you go through those doors, you're traveling through a little bit of time yourself, and keep your eyes open for Bertha. Keep your eyes open for the ghost of Churchill, who supposedly visits the bar, and definitely keep your eyes out for Red Jack, because he came through those doors at one point, more than likely. Now, we've talked cults. Gerard John Schaefer says he was the leader of a cult. People at the Devil's Tree supposedly, are there with black robes all the time. It is in Oak Hammock State Park. It is closed at dusk. You're not supposed to go there after dark. People do. There is a wonderful gopher tortoise there that we love, and he is right there near the Devil's Tree, so please don't burn it down. We would hate to see that gopher tortoise have to go homeless, let alone all the other wonderful animals there. But if you do want to see the Devil's Tree, I will give you advice. When you go there, there's a main path that goes through the woods. That will take you a long way around, and you will pass 2 what they call false Devil's Trees. There are 2 really big, beautiful oaks there. But to find the Devil's Tree, you take a path along the water, you skip that first entrance, you go to the second entrance. You'll pass the box turtle who's been there every time we've been for the last 10 years. You'll go down that path to the left, and you'll take that short walk to the Devil's Tree. And then it's just a brief, short few steps behind the Devil's Tree to get to the foundation of the house that Gerard had his victims in. So when you travel these by roads and you go to these dark places, respect the land around them, respect the victims, but also respect Florida's nature and respect these parks. The park rangers work hard to keep these places intact for you, and so that you can come visit and you can explore them. When you go visit Estero and go to Koreshan State Park, go on a night when they're doing one of the tours or when they're doing one of the speeches in the old theater. Sometimes they still have performances. But you can always follow these things by visiting us at eerietravels.com or erieflorida.com. And we do speaking arrangements all over the United States, but mostly Florida and the Southeast. But we are happy to come speak wherever you'd like us to. But keep an eye out here for future episodes where we will visit more dark places. We'll be talking some serial killers, but we'll also be talking cryptids, monsters, and UFOs. See you on the other side.